Hi, everyone. Welcome today on another episode of the Data Dojo. Today, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Jim Walsh, the CTO or Chief Technology Officer at Globallogic. He has over 30 years of experience in software development. He's been a pivotal figure in the tech industry. He has education from Harvard and a PhD from Duke University. And throughout his illustrious career, he's worked in different industries, including Apple and Epiphany, and his current not recent, but role at Globallogic. So at Globallogic, Dr. Walsh leads innovation, architecture, and technology. He has a team of over 6,000 technical people. He's helped numerous Fortune 500 clients and startups navigating their technological journey. So I'm very happy and excited to have you here, Dr. Jim. So why don't you tell us more about your career?
I think you've covered it pretty well, Sakati. But yeah, I started out while I was in graduate school, getting my PhD. My wife and I had our first baby, and I had worked with computers since I was a teenager, actually. And so I had the opportunity to begin work as developing software for a company where my father was their chief legal counsel. So that launched my software career, and I've been working in it ever since. And I've been in Silicon Valley for 36 years now. Worked in Silicon Valley, came here in 1988, and as you mentioned, Apple, Next, Rational, and many other startups that you probably have not heard of. So I've worked for 7 startups,
Wow.
of which 3 have been successful, and 4. But that's actually a pretty good record for Silicon Valley. I mean,
Agreed.
yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. So, you mentioned that you've had experience working for startups and, given how big Globallogic is, can you tell us more about the experiences or the differences? How is it like working for a startup, scaling from 0 to 1 versus a more established company like Apple or maybe Globallogic for now?
Well, that I think what people generally say is that in a startup, you have a lot of impact on a little, right?
Mm.
And in a large company like Globallogic, or even more so Hitachi, you have tremendous resources. But you're one of 400,000 people, and I'm fortunate enough to be for Hitachi and 32,000 for Globallogic. So I'm fortunate enough to be, in an influential role.
Mm.
So there are many more resources you have available to bring to bear on a problem, but you're part of a much larger team. Whereas in a startup, especially if you're one of the founders, it's your vision and tunnel vision. You really don't have to persuade people because um, the only way you're aligned pretty much automatically by the nature of the beast. That the only way an individual is going to be successful is by making the company successful.
Mm-hmm.
And as companies get larger in general, I'm not talking about Globallogic or Hitachi or any other particular organization, but as companies get larger, then tend to have multiple agendas, and often very legitimately so. And you spend a lot of your time trying to align people around a common purpose, right?
Right.
And so they require a different set of skills. I'm fortunate enough in my position that I have worked with a lot of clients leading their innovation initiatives, and they tend to be aligned behind them, or else they're not clients. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I get to do a lot of what I enjoy about a startup, but within
Mm.
the context of a much larger company, which is kind of the best of both, which is why I've been here 15 years.
Yeah.
And then my next longest tenure at any company was 7 years. But
Wow.
just, I
More than
just
double.
I have kept going because it's been exciting and different every day. So
Right. Right. Well, lovely. And I've also observed that I've had a chance to talk to a lot of people at Global Logic throughout my career as well, and I've seen like Global Logic has been very you know prioritize being agile a lot more than now that it's common for many companies. But even before the how agile became popular, Globallogic has been the spearhead, spearheading this global agile processes and including Scrum. And I've seen that you've championed that agile process at various companies before Globallogic. So can you discuss some challenges being an early adopter of such methods at a company as big as Globallogic, and also your previous experiences? How did you overcome challenges, and what were the
yeah.
successes you have experienced?
Well, yeah, and that's actually um, quite it's been a very interesting journey because the first years of my working in software. I've been at it long enough that Agile didn't really exist.
Mm.
But I did work at two companies, at Rational and at Next in the 1990s, where before the term Agile was even invented, we
Yeah.
used iterative development methodology.
Mm.
For example, at Next, where we were producing an operating system, which is now OS 10, by the way, it's morphed into OS
Mm.
10 after our acquisition by Apple. So I'm
Oh.
on OS 10 right now, and it's a successor to what we were developing then. Back in those days, even though we had 5.5 million lines of code in those days, we had a weekly build.
Mm.
So every week we had a new, what we today call an iteration, where
Mm-hmm.
Jobs reviewed it personally. It was installed on his desktop. It was put into
Wow.
production throughout the company. And, so we had the equivalent of a sprint, a weekly sprint in that case,
Mm-hmm.
even at Globallogic. And then when I was at Rational, that was the time period where we invented what was called the Rational Unified Process, which was based on work done by Grady Booch, which he called a round trip iterative gestalt. That name
Wow.
never, but the basic
I like
idea,
it. Yeah.
yeah, was a cyclical style of software development. So
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of that plus one. I was kind of conditioned that when Agile was coined in the year 2000, when I became aware of it, I read a book called Extreme Programming by a guy named Kent
Yeah.
Beck, and
Yeah.
it made me angry. It made me so angry
Mm-hmm.
because I had always felt that I was really good at planning things out and good at doing architecture, good at doing product roadmaps and things like that. And he asked the question, when was the last time any project plan
Mm-hmm.
you came up with happened the way you had
Yeah.
planned?
Yeah.
And I had to admit, never.
Never.
If I was
Yeah.
honest with myself, never, because things change. I mean, engineers get sick, people,
Mm.
the requirements change because of external things, competition change.
Right.
He made the point that the best you can hope for is to optimize for change. So
Mm-hmm.
I began introducing Agile in the startup where I was then VP of engineering, and we saw tremendous gains in productivity. And then I took it with me to succeeding companies and startups. And until finally I was at a company called Corian Systems, where I was VP of
Mm.
one of our VPs of engineering, we had more than one. And I introduced Agile in a global distributed environment. And the president of the company that was our supplier at that time was a guy named
Mm-hmm.
Samant. And it became very, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a world-class product development organization that was in India, in
Right.
the Netherlands, in
Mm.
East Coast of the US, Western Coast of the US, and it all worked together really beautifully, including customer support. And when Shashank went to Globallogic, he said, Jim, why don't you come with me and we'll do what you did at Corian at
Right.
scale. Yeah. So I found that even though I took a pay cut to go to Globallogic, a friend had
Oh.
he said, when are you ever going to get a chance to use everything you enjoy doing?
Mm.
Just agile, travel,
Mm.
technology, public speaking,
Yeah.
writing, that,
Right.
so I took his advice and I joined Globallogic and I've never regretted it. And 15 years
Wonderful.
later, yeah.
Wow.
From that
Wonderful.
time, we had 1,200 people at that time, and I believe
Oh,
you're,
wow.
yeah. And today we're 32,000,
Wow.
and we've
That's
gone from
phenomenal.
80 million at that time in revenue to close to 2 billion today. So it's been a very, very exciting journey.
That's amazing. It's amazing. So what would you say, like, given their experience working for so many companies, is it harder to implement agile in a startup or smaller companies or in a more established company? Because both have like, their own pitfalls and things to
In
handle.
an established company, yeah, it's
Mm.
definitely harder. But I when I first came to GlobalLogic, one of the things, so part of my charter was to turn this into an agile company. And there were pockets of agile within GlobalLogic that were very high performing at that time.
Mm.
It predates me,
Right.
but my charter was to spread these best practices. And GlobalLogic is a services company, so we develop software
Mm.
for other companies.
Yeah.
So our clients obviously have a say in how we develop software, right?
Yeah.
So I asked the people who've been around a while, uh, who is the least likely to ever turn agile? And they pointed to one of our telcos. And
Mm.
so I began working with them on the benefits of agile, as well as you first, my strategy was first you work with the willing people,
Yeah.
same time, and you can move relatively rapidly there.
Right.
And but then you also tackle your biggest foes, your biggest opponents. You figure out why they're not becoming agile, why they're
Mm.
not adapting agile, and smart people work in software and they have a reason,
Right.
they're not using it or a fear that, you know. So I began working with that telco client. I began working with our medical device clients where we're doing life critical medical devices. And actually, they both became agile
Wow.
and over time. And in my mind, agile is the best way to develop software in a distributed fashion because you also distribute autonomy along with the software. So you give each team a mission, you empower the teams.
Right.
It's a very empowering methodology. And there's no way that you can do task management, across 12 time zones
Yeah.
effectively. It
Yeah.
just paralyzes the team,
Yeah.
So setting up agile in creating independent thought, standing up the thought leaders is
Yeah.
really a big part of our Globallogic success, I believe.
Agreed. Agreed. But curious to know like what happens when there are like topics or, for example, Gen AI or things which are coming up at such a fast and rapid pace that it still has a lot of uncertainties. And when you plan out your work for the week or 2 weeks or whatever, there's a lot of discovery. We're also working in an agile environment, and it's always like you estimate that it's going to take a week, but it ends up taking a longer time because there are so many uncertainties because of how fast the technology is changing. So how do you deal with those kind of technologies?
Well, my approach has been that kind of philosophically is that agile engineers work best, most productively, and enjoy their work more, moving from one period of certainty to the next. And the reason
Right.
2 weeks has kind of become a default standard there
Yeah.
is that it's the kind of the minimum amount of time it takes to get a meaningful
Right.
the work done, but it's
Right.
also the maximum amount of time you can expect a program manager to not change things, right? So if you go to the program
Yeah.
manager and say, can't you wait 2 weeks? Can't you, can't we do this? We're
Yeah.
already, you're on average, you're halfway through a sprint, right? Can
Right.
you take a week to do that? Let's
Yeah.
let the team finish what they're doing, then we move on to the next thing. So I think you need that kind of punctuated moments of certainty, right? Where
Right.
for some, and maybe you can't guarantee certainty for 2 weeks. Maybe you have to make a 1 week, you know, but during that period of certainty, you don't change anything, and you never expand the amount of time to get work done, right? You get it done, or you don't get it done. It meets the done criteria, or it doesn't meet the done criteria. So at the end of sprint, it's not done. It's not done. It's not like the end of the world or anything, but I'm not going to count that against our burn down
Yes.
chart. I'm not going to count. It's like it's not done, guys. It didn't meet the done
Yeah.
criteria.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's just that simple, and especially where you have high volume. So part of, like I mentioned, at Next, we used this predates Agile, but it was today is very Agile sort of work where we had basically weekly sprints, what we would call them today. And Steve Jobs himself was our product manager.
Oh,
And
wow.
Steve was, I mean, not officially, but in practice. So he is famous for changing his mind.
Yeah. Heard
So
that.
part of the reason we could be effective, and we ran rings around Microsoft in terms of we could ship our operating system a new version every 4 months. At a time, it was taking Microsoft to ship every 18 months, 18 to 24
Oh,
months.
wow.
Theirs didn't work, and ours did.
Yeah.
A little prejudice there for those times, for the 90s. Things have changed. But
Definitely. Yeah.
the reason we could deliver quickly and in high quality was because we had those 1 week intervals, right? And we
Right.
wouldn't change anything. The engineers could work against this known period of time. They knew the priorities were not going to get changed, and for that 1 week, and then the next week was a fresh start, and the next week was a fresh
Right.
start. And I think that's what you have to do, especially with Gen AI. We get surprised all the time. The content
Exactly.
is growing to megabyte when we were all working around 128K. To
Right.
the sizes, and it's like these things just they keep coming
It's
and
coming.
multimodal, and it's great, right?
Yes.
And you can't just drop everything and adopt it, right? You have to finish what you're doing, then rationally move on to the next thing. It's like, now we have 1 million tokens to work with. So
Yeah.
do it a different way, and then you move to one
Mm.
moment of certainty to the next, right?
Mm.
And that way you deliver quickly instead of burning everybody out.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
And
Yeah.
immature
Very
startups burn everybody out, and I've been part of those too. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great advice. Something to note for, yeah, everybody. So like you talked a lot about agile, and as a services company, we know that, quality and delivery assurance is very, very key.
Yes.
And when you're planning, working in an agile, like quality is also part of like story pointing and things like that.
Yeah.
So how do you, how did you envision like quality and test engineering best practices at Global Logic and being agile and delivering like these high quality products and services at the same time?
Right. Well, I think the key to control of any agile project is the ready and done criteria, right? So how do you know that a backlog item is groomed and ready to be worked on, right?
Hmm.
And that needs to be spelled out. It needs to be a checklist. It needs to be something that's either ready or it's not ready.
Yeah.
And we have the guru for our agile practices, a guy named Mayank Gupta, and on projects where he has been in charge, he's
Hmm.
actually sent his team home when there
Wow.
was not enough work to be worked on uh,
Wow.
for the next. Yeah. And I thought that was a brilliant move
It
because
is.
the tendency for engineers is, we all want to be effective. We all want to get stuff done. We want to do stuff, right? I mean, that's who we are. We want to do
Mm.
stuff. And the problem though is if your requirements are not ready to be worked on, you're going to do the wrong thing
True.
because
True.
you don't know what they are, right?
Mm.
And what happens? Who gets blamed for that? It's never the product owner, right? It's
Yeah.
always you guys don't get it. You don't understand it.
Right.
You didn't,
Right.
and of course they didn't understand it because it was not clear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The engineers are doing the best they know how based on the
Mm.
information they have. So by sending the team home, Mike sent a strong message to the right people, which is the people responsible for grooming the backlog that you didn't do
Mm.
your job. You
Good
know,
job. Yeah.
we don't have enough that's in the ready state that
Hmm.
the team can be productive for the next sprint. So we're going to delay the beginning of this sprint by X amount of time or whatever, and
Wow.
I thought that was brilliant,
That is. That
and it
is.
got because it put the the and I don't mean blame in the sense that you're a bad person. I mean
Mm.
that it put the burden onto the right shoulders, right?
Mm.
Which is the people grooming the backlog and the ones responsible
Yeah.
for getting things to the ready criteria enough
Mm.
to the ready criteria that we have enough for a whole sprint. And then similarly, the done criteria that
Mm.
needs to be really clear and include all the quality things you just mentioned. So uh,
Right.
so that we have test coverage to 96% or whatever the criteria is, that we
Mm.
have all functional all positive test cases are automated, negative test cases are done by hand, will be automated in the next sprint, yada yada yada. So you have it all
Right.
filled out very concretely. It's either done or it's not done. And if it's not
Mm.
done, then our velocity is slowed, and we
Yeah.
could include the velocity is just who's done,
Right.
to the done criteria, and that's the
Right.
way you control the quality, and eventually you can get to a point where there's no quality debt, that
Mm.
all quality is all issues are resolved, or at least first all critical high medium issues are resolved in the sprint where they're discovered, right? And
Mm.
they carry over some in practice some cosmetic issues or something,
Right.
but generally you never go from one sprint to the other with any
Yeah.
significant quality problems. And this is achievable. You know, not every team, not every client,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, but
Absolutely.
it's
It's
achievable. We've
achievable.
done it many, many times, right? And I think you just have to hold the team accountable that way. And the way that we work is that Globallogic works is that often the clients will do the product management, and
Mm-hmm.
there'll be the product managers, the product owners. Our team will be engineering, architecture, DevOps,
Mm-hmm.
technical side of things. These two have to work together, and you're limited in your ability in telling the client what to do. You can that backlog's not grouped, and so
Yeah.
because we're a service,
Right.
but where you get a smart client and they listen and they learn, you can deal with that. I'm sorry.
Mm. No worries.
Sorry, I should have turned that off before we
No
started.
worries. No worries. You're good. Well, I love that fact that, the Mayank was his name, right? He sent people home.
Yes,
There are,
you did.
that's brilliant. I have never heard that before. That's
it
awesome.
it was brilliant, and it really changed the culture. It's like,
It is. Culture is so important.
because the people who are grooming the backlog don't feel that they're accountable
Yeah.
at the same level they hold the engineers accountable.
Right.
So I think, making the strong message that you're both accountable for the success of this project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you know that we are also partnering. Like I work for Boomi, and so it's nice that there is a partnership and very good partnership. So
Yes.
um, moving on to something a different topic. So you mentioned that because you're in a leadership position and how requirements are changing, I want to know a little bit more about how Globallogic was before the Hitachi acquisition. And I've heard like really great things about how the culture has changed after the Hitachi acquisition. But tell us more about the pre-Hitachi and post-Hitachi acquisition.
Um, I I don't know that our culture has changed that much. I mean, certainly, uh, the the Hitachi's. It's been it's uh, we were acquired just over 3 years ago, and it was really, I think, a brilliant acquisition for them because what they really wanted was to digitally transform their larger
Hmm.
companies. Globallogic is, we're significant size, we're 32,000 people, but
Right.
400,000 people, right? And 600 plus operating companies. And
Mm.
transforming the entire Hitachi group is a huge challenge. And that for the Hitachi facing parts of this company, um, Japan has a different uh, way of doing things culturally, that they're extremely consensus driven. There's actually a lot of empowerment that goes to lower levels of the company, and getting the buy-in of the various groups
Mm.
is really essential to the success of a project. So it's been a learning process, working with them, and also in terms of agility. There's some ways that that consensus culture uh, gets in the way of agility because the natural tendency is to want to get the consensus up front
Right.
before you begin work. Whereas with
Mm.
agile, you
You have to.
get an overall consensus, refine, and you're
Mm.
along, right? So
Right.
I don't think frankly, I don't think we quite figured it out all the way.
Mm.
I think we've made significant inroads, and there are many parts of Hitachi, but uh,
Hmm.
and many others that we've moved very quickly. But I think we're still feeling our way in terms of
Right.
how to harmonize the Japanese
Mm.
culture, which brings many positive advantages, by the way. The courtesy people have toward each other, the
Yes.
creativity, many aspects that are very positive. But to move fast and also move in a quality way
Mm.
is something that we're still working on. It's going to take
Yeah.
time. Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
I think and I know we were going to get into Gen AI, Sugati, but I think the thing that's very interesting about Gen AI applied to the software development process in connection with Agile
Mm.
is that whether you move in a waterfall-ish way, which they're
Hmm.
not highly waterfall, or an agile way, everything's going to become agile
Yeah.
simply because it's going to take very little time to do some of the things that used to be the long poles in the tent, right? So
Absolutely.
everything, the whole process collapses. And whether you call yourself waterfall, whether you call yourself agile, you're going to end up doing iterative development.
You have to. Yeah.
There's no choice, right? I mean, it's just the things that used to prolong your life cycle are no longer going to prolong it. So,
Mm.
you take a year to decide up front, but then
Absolutely.
not very
Yeah.
quick, and it might work very well, or you can decide iteratively, you can deploy, test,
Mm.
understand, what the customer feedback is, iterate. So, the two become more similar than they are different. So I
Mm.
think, throwing Gen AI into the mix is going to change the agile equation a lot, not philosophically, but in terms of,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Gen AI has been here for like less than, I think, 1.5 years, and look at how much transformation it has already brought.
Yes.
I was going to ask you, the next question is like, from Globallogic's perspective, what are your thoughts on the future trends, especially with Gen AI coming into play? Like, are there any strategies you're thinking about placing yourself as a Gen AI leader, or anything that you want to share on just your general thoughts about Gen AI?
Yeah, yeah. We're Globallogic has worked with a lot of clients on digital transformation. So,
Mhm.
and very large clients, Fortune 100 clients, and it'll down to literal mom and pop businesses. And the way we define digital transformation is that transformation piece of that is, or technology transformation generally, is that you imagine uh, business models that weren't possible before. You use the technology to enable a business model you couldn't already have, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, Uber uh,
Yeah.
could not exist without digital technology.
Yeah.
That's why it's considered a digital native, right?
Mm.
Amazon Marketplace could not exist
Yeah.
without digital technology. There's many companies that are the only way they can exist is and business model could exist, the gig economy and so on, would be because of digital, right? And so there's that on the one hand, the transform companies, the native companies. And then the middle ground is what are digitally enabled or technology enabled companies who use technology to do what they're doing today better. So for example, many retail companies have websites, right? Which are, of course,
Right.
digital technology, right? So that would be, I would consider that a digitally enabled business, right?
Right. Right.
Because they continue to do what their current business model is, sell things,
Yeah.
stock
Yeah.
inventory, ship inventory, they sell things and so on. It's just, a different sales channel, basically, right? But they haven't transformed the nature of their business. So that's a digitally, nothing right or wrong on this, by the way, but that's a digitally enabled business, so using a technology to do something that you already do better, faster, and cheaper.
Mm.
A transformed business is one that from the ground up, or transformed a native business from the ground up could not exist without that technology as essential.
Mm.
So where Globallogic is going with this is what we do is we do software product development as a service, right? So we work for clients large and small, and we develop their money-making products, or
Right.
help develop, or sometimes we do everything. We do design, architecture, engineering, everything. Sometimes we just do part of that, sometimes we just do tests, sometimes we just do development, sometimes we just do design and architecture, but that's our business, So to come back to your question, Gen AI, what we're doing today is we're using Gen AI to create a Gen AI enabled software development methodology, right? So there's emerging tools, for doing things like code generation, test case generation,
Right.
backlog grooming, backlog prioritization, modernization,
Right.
code understanding. That's great, and so you plug them into your existing project process,
Okay.
and you're going to go faster and faster,
Much
right?
faster. Yeah.
But that's the technology enabled business, right? That's the department store with a website, okay, which is necessary, but in my mind, it's not nearly sufficient, right?
Right.
Well, what Logic wants to become is we want to become a Gen AI native
Mm.
product development services company.
Right.
So we're thinking through is what does Gen AI make possible? What style of software development in the future, will become possible because of Gen AI technology that's not possible today.
Okay.
And we call that initiative Velocity AI. After our original Agile tool set
Right.
was called Velocity because of Agile
Yeah.
Velocity. So we're calling
Yeah.
it Velocity AI, which is going to accelerate, not just by 30-40%, but what we have in mind is tenfold,
Wow.
product development acceleration, and in a matter of years. This is not going to happen overnight, right? But basic idea would be not just using these point solutions to uh, accelerate parts of the existing life cycle, but rethink the entire software development life cycle.
Wow. That's
Scrum.
powerful.
Yeah. And when you start doing that, it gives you kind of surprising results too. For example, testing. So today testing is essential, right?
Right.
But let's say in the future, and this is not true today, by the way. I mean, generating code is pretty. It helps speed things up, but it's very much a human-centric process. Gen AI.
Absolutely.
So you might get 30% acceleration in coding or something. But let's say you could do 100% code generation.
Yeah.
Gen AI, not true, but let's say
That's
5%.
hypothetical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hypothetically, would you need to test?
Yeah.
Well, why? I mean, if your test cases are generated from the same requirements that generated your code, all you're really testing is the generation process. Your test. So, for example, so years ago when I did some consulting for Borland, I helped create their compiler testing suite for C++, right? A compiler validation suite. How many people run that suite today? Nobody, because you assume your C++ compiler works, right?
Right. Right.
We're gonna do the same thing that we're gonna assume that as these tools mature, you're going to assume that whatever your backlog says, whatever your prompt library, or however the backlog is realized in the future, whatever that says, the code generator is going to generate correctly, right? So there's no more need to
For
validate.
testing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this won't happen overnight, right?
It's gonna
But
take a
there's
while.
elements of and it may not ever happen, I don't know, but I have worked with code generation before, and this is what I found is that if you're testing it from the same set of requirements, it's like, wait a minute, we're actually not testing everything. Every test case passes every time, right?
Mm,
Yeah. So you need to find a different way. Not saying you don't do testing, but you need to find a different way of testing that's
mm,
not based on the same requirements you're using to generate the code. You have to,
right.
kind of
Yeah.
subtle things like that,
Mm,
that when you're doing a Gen AI native style of software development, some of these
right.
things change.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're very excited about this, by the way, John.
I'm also excited to see this. This is
Well, we need good people.
hopefully it can be sooner than, let's see, 2, 3 years from now. It's
Yes,
awesome.
yeah. And I think that's about the time frame I'm guessing
Mm,
before these techniques start to be important. I mean, that
mm,
Gen AI native techniques. I think
right.
Gen AI enabled software development is important today, but I
True.
think people who aren't involved in doing it directly can overestimate how good it is
Mm,
from the hype.
true.
It's kind of overhyped. But
Agreed.
not to say it isn't real. It is real,
Right.
but it's not, you've seen the code that it generates and the test cases it generates and stuff. They're used
Mm,
starting points, right? Uh,
right.
do speed things up, but somebody needs to look it over and say, that one's not right, or this one
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense at all. And where
True.
did I put that? Or that's a great one. I never thought of that. So
Mm,
it's a mix, but it's
right.
human-centric. But we've got to get switch from being human-centric Gen AI enabled to Gen
Gen
AI-centric
native.
human. Yeah.
Wow. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Removing the human in the loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think humans, we've kind of gamed it out. We've done some simulations and things like that. Humans are still going to be required because the software is used by humans,
Of
right?
course. Yes.
And the humans need to be able to tell the software what they want and whether they're
Mm,
right or wrong. And that I think for the foreseeable future, you'll be able to develop more with more functionality, more test cases, more whatever with fewer people.
right.
But I also think the size of the market will grow enormously as the cost per unit of development falls.
Mm,
Demand, demand
yeah.
elasticity thing, yeah, is going to grow a lot. So yeah,
Wow.
it'll be a very interesting future that
Very,
you'll.
very
Yeah,
excited to see
yeah.
this.
Yes, you will too. You
Yeah.
will. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It was very, very insightful. I'm really excited to see this. Um,
Welcome.
so I want to move to the last section of our conversation, which is the lightning round. So I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you 10 questions and you have to answer it without thinking much.
Okay.
Okay. Your favorite programming language? I know you don't code right now, but what it would be?
Well, I do a little bit of stuff, with Jason and stuff like that and pseudocode and things. But I
Ah,
have to say my favorite is still C.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of my roots. Tells you
absolutely.
how long I've been doing this.
Um,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, I still love C, so yeah.
Okay, good.
Next question is an obvious one, but still, agile or waterfall?
Agile, sure.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Most impactful book you've read?
Uh, Probably my favorite book, and this might get me in trouble politically, but Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And the
uh,
Bible, yeah, lots of impactful books, but yes.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. One word to describe your leadership style.
Um, I I'm more of a leader than a manager. So
Okay. Love
I
it.
lead by example.
Love it.
I keep doing things until I find somebody who can do it better, and then I hand
Mm.
it off to them. And try to mentor people so they get better at me than me.
Oh,
So yeah.
love it. Beautiful. Technology trend that you're most excited about.
Oh, definitely Gen AI. Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
particularly, I mean, I spent my whole adult life working in software development, so
hmm,
particularly its impact on software development,
software.
but also, it's going to make possible so many things we couldn't do before, and makes easy some of the
Hmm.
really hard to do. Like I
Right.
recently reviewed a security product that I realized that this would have been just 2 years ago. This would have been really hard, but today
Hmm.
it's
It's
really
easy.
easy. You could do it in your basement. You know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So many startups have come up since Gen
Oh,
AI.
awesome. Yeah.
Um, your favorite productivity tool or app or hack?
Mm. Productivity tool. Um, oh, my favorite in terms of enjoyment is my Apple Vision Pro, right? The
Ah, I have
goggles.
tried
Uh,
it.
yeah, yeah. And I bought one, and I use it when I write blogs and
Mm.
stuff like that because I love to sit in my backyard when I'm working. And this way I have this giant, I can still see,
Yeah.
nature in my garden. And but I have this giant screen hovering in front of me and I can
Mm.
type it, Bluetooth keyboard here. And I don't know if it shows up. And it's just a wonderful way to be productive. I don't know, is it improving my productivity? I don't know. But my quality of life, I
Is
really
it?
impact. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Is it like too heavy or?
I can use it for a couple hours without I don't get any headaches, but just yeah, it's kind of a bit top heavy and finally you're relieved to take it off. But I think, before the technology catches on, the form factor is gonna have to get a lot lighter and stuff like that. But I love what it shows is coming.
Hmm. Awesome. Um, the best piece of advice you've ever received.
Not to become an actor. So,
Interesting.
yeah. So I loved when I was in high school. I loved speech and drama, and I did a lot of it. And I went to a Catholic school, and my
Mm.
drama teacher was a nun who'd grown up in a theatrical family. Her father was
Wow.
an actor, and I was thinking seriously about it. And she said, "Jim, you have a tendency to only come alive when you're on stage, and real life is what happens when you're not." And
Yeah.
uh, that was the best piece of advice I ever took. I got a lot of good advice that I didn't take, but
Right.
that's the best one I ever took, I think.
Wow. Wow. I was expecting some other like motivational or inspiration. This was a
No, no,
surprise.
no. But I mean, what was great about that advice, and I think what's great about good advice in general is the person knows you, they know
Mm.
your personality, they know what
Right.
motivates, and they're acting in your best interest.
Yeah.
I try to give advice like that to my team, which they take sometimes they don't.
Mm.
But that was a very good role model for me from Sister Rita McGinnis.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine
Yeah.
the future or where you would have been today.
Yes,
Yeah. Last question. If you could meet any tech leader, who would it be and why?
Elon Musk, I think. So I met Steve Jobs. I got to know Steve Jobs
Yeah. Yeah.
pretty well. And I've been in the same room as Bill Gates and many of the other ones,
Oh, wow.
um, but Elon Musk, I think he's just amazing. He's very quirky. Uh, you know, must
Controversial.
must be very hard to work for, but what a
What a
genius.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And he takes the most unlikely things that I think he's crazy for doing and turns them into successes. And
Yeah.
what a mind the guy must have.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd love to meet him sometime.
I think the best thing I'm also a big fan, like, is that he doesn't do the things that are like buzzing or conventional. Like he started SpaceX
Yeah.
when and Neuralink or whatever he does, it's not like following what everybody else is doing. It's just
Oh, no,
asking
it's
the
very much.
whys or like following the first principles. It's
Oh yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And you hear about SpaceX and he says, how is that? And he turned it into a success,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
success, a technical success.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Genius.
Yeah. I'm glad he's
I
around. Yeah.
Yeah, a little controversial, but yeah, you see the
Yeah, well, it's
positives.
definitely controversial. Yeah. I don't know if I'd like it, but I think he's pretty amazing. I
He
think he's
is. He
glad he's
is.
around. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those were all my questions. Do you have any advice or parting thoughts you would like to say and share with our audience?
Um, not well, I guess, that I was involved in very early in the internet, right? That 1994, my team stood up our company's first website, and I've read back that at that time there were only 10,000 websites in the world.
Mm.
Now there's
Wow.
over a million, right?
Yeah.
And the and I think and I could see many others could see it's not like I was unique
Mm.
at even back then that this technology is going to transform the world, right? And it
True.
did.
It
And it did.
did.
But I think the thing to keep in mind is that it's not going to do it in a predictable way. So
Mm.
I think 2 or 3 years, before we start seeing all this big stuff. But I thought that about the internet too, right? And all kinds of things happened.
Mm.
There were 9/11, there were wars, there were
Right.
stock market crash, there was,
Yeah.
and realistically, by the time, the promise of the internet started to happen, it was closer to 10 years, a
Mm.
bit longer, right?
True.
Because, life happens, and
Yeah.
it's not, if you're a tech person, you look at the technology and you think about how rapidly you can evolve it, right?
True.
And you think about what's in your control, but you don't think about everything that's not in your control,
Mm.
that's outside in the.
Right.
So, what I like to say is I'm very good at predicting the future, but I'm not very good at when it will happen, right?
True.
And I think that's that we're going to see that with Gen AI. So we
Agreed.
may be here and change the world in 2 or 3 years, right? May take 10,
Yeah.
maybe one.
Never know. Never know. That's
Yeah,
true. Like a lot of people
yeah,
compare like Gen AI to the .com era or maybe sometimes blockchain or things, cryptocurrency. But for some reason, it just feels more fast paced and bigger than I was not there. I was probably very young during the .com era. And
yeah.
I feel like people nowadays have become so fast paced in adapting to technology, adapting change. It just seems bigger and faster than that time.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but the internet era felt a lot. I mean, of course, the whole industry and the whole dependence on software at that time was much smaller,
Mm.
but it did have a lot of the same feel. That
Mm.
something new was happening every day, every week, every month.
Stuff to catch up.
Well, from my perspective, it was just exciting, right? I try to use technology to solve business problems or other
Mm.
types of problems, right? So the stuff coming up is another tool that I can potentially use, which is
Right.
for me more exciting than it is
Mm.
scary. But you have to be willing to throw stuff away too, right? Because
True.
you invest a lot in the classic RAG model, right?
Yeah.
And when advanced drag and the latest versions come out, right, with larger context windows and stuff like that.
Mm.
Well, all that work,
Yeah.
and things change so fast that
Mm.
you just have to be flexible. I mean, that's the spirit of agile, right? Is that
Mm.
you design and build for change, right? And
Absolutely.
in a rapidly moving technology environment, change sometimes includes, whoops, what we just did doesn't is wasted. We better start over. We better try it this way. Let's adopt this,
Mm.
right? But
Yeah.
I think moving from certainty to certain moments of certainty,
Yeah.
systematically, not getting overly amped about something or overly down about something, and
Mm.
just taking every change as an opportunity,
Right.
is how you get through this and prosper. So
Mm.
I think that would be my advice actually. So,
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Love it.
thank you, Sugata. Great
Thank
to
you so much. Thank you so much for your time. It was great chatting with you. I learned a lot. Yeah.
my pleasure.